Welcome to my new 2024 election prediction, so let's start. And here's the safe state. So in this Trump landslide video, it is kind of close, but if everything comes true and the polls are way off yet again, and Trump is able to do even better than 2020 and 2016, I could see Texas going to the right, not only of 2020, which was a 5% Trump win, but even 2016, which was a Trump win by 9%. I think he could just barely be able to go above that 12-point margin, making it a safe state for him. So Iowa, Ohio, both these states went for Donald Trump by 8%, and just a small polling miss could see these states going by a safe margin for him. And now for the likely states. So as you can see, Illinois is still not filled in yet, but for my home state, ActiVote did do a poll and only shows an 18% victory for Harris. And, we see another polling miss like we saw in 2020. I wouldn't be surprised this drops down into a likely state for Harris, especially with her campaigning with Liz Cheney for some reason in the Rust Belt instead of the Sun Belt. Those type of things could maybe come back to hurt her come election day, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. For another bluish state for Oregon, not much to say here. Kind of similar to Illinois in some way, that it's just above that safe margin threshold. Still 16%. Polling miss in the Trump wave landslide would mean just below that 12% margin, just like that. And that makes me think about Colorado. So Colorado, it's one of the few states that has been swaying hard to the left for the past decade or so. So this is probably one of the harder ones for Donald Trump to improve on from 2020. But assuming he does quite well, and the polls are wrong yet again, and assuming voters are more interested in things like the economy instead of abortion, I could see this barely being below a safe state margin. So yeah, likely D. And now we can actually move on to the Northeast. Actually, yeah. So in the Northeast, you got Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware. All of these states were barely, I would say, I think they were just on the low end of the safe margin threshold. So New Jersey, that actually, ActiVote has this barely as 12%, and they're not the most reliable pollsters, so wouldn't be surprised if they're off and they're oversampling Democrats, and that could mean Trump losing here by 8%, maybe 5 to 7%, or around that margin, perhaps, who knows. And Delaware, with Biden not being on the ticket in 2024, he won't get that home state advantage that Democrats got in 2020, and we could see it revert back to what Clinton got in 2016. So that's why I have this barely by probably 9 to 11%. And for Connecticut, this is a bit of a hot take, but immigration crisis, maybe the economy is the main issue for voters, and the abortion is not that important. And alongside some luck for Donald Trump, I could see this barely dropping down to a likely D margin for the Democrats right here. And now for the likely state for the GOP in Arizona. So talking about polling misses, so there's this Twitter account that Admiral Groove was actually shared with me, and it basically weighs polls from 2024 and reweighs them with the same polling miss that 2020 had, but in 2024. So in Arizona, a state that is really good for Trump right now, overall, it actually shows him by 3%. If we have a polling miss even bigger than 2020, times that by 2 or 3, this would mean a Trump victory here by a likely margin. Bear in mind, 538 already has this as lean R, and they can be at times wrong, so I could see Trump winning here by a 5 to 7% margin and a Trump red landslide victory. And that's it for the likely states. You heard it right. We're gonna move on to the lean states. And since, let me see, since we're right here, we can just move on to Nevada. Nevada, according to Pollfair, Nevada would actually be at least a Trump by 2 state, assuming there's a polling miss like 2020. And I think I could put this as likely R for Donald Trump in his best case scenario, but the polling does show it's going to be one of the hardest states for Donald Trump to win in 2024, it seems, from the Biden won in 2020. But still, if the polling industry is wrong yet again, that means he wins here by a lean margin, probably 2 to 4%. For New Mexico, unfortunately, nothing on Pollfair, but New Mexico 10.8%. Don't forget that Telemundo poll that I shared a few days ago, though. I should say a week now. And here's the poll from Telemundo showing Harris barely getting above 50% with Latinos, and this from NBC Telemundo. And Biden won here. Biden won with Latinos and Hispanics by 36%. So if that repeats, if that is what happens in 2024, that'd be terrible for Harris. And I could barely see her winning New Mexico by a lean margin, especially if those numbers with Latinos are that bad. Let's just stay in the Sun Belt for now. For Georgia, right here, the Peach State poll fair, average polls weighed in, shows Trump winning here by 2%. And I agree with that. I will say that Georgia is one of the states that is slowly slipping away from the GOP, but still, the turnout for Democrats is not looking good at all, and I think Trump easily wins here in this scenario, of course. And for North Carolina, state similar to Georgia, North Carolina shows Trump winning here by the same margin as its neighboring state, and I see that clearly. I could even put this as likely R, but probably like 3 to 5%, but yeah, we will see what happens, but not looking good right now for Democrats in the Sun Belt. And let's see, Maine at large, even the best case scenario for Donald Trump, I don't see it flipping. I don't know, it could be close, but I think it's lean D by barely by 1 to 3%. And yeah, as you can see, New York is still here, so the reason why I have New York still not colored in yet is because how tight it is. On 538, it has Harris winning here by only 14%. And bear in mind that it went to Biden by almost 10% more. And if the polls are oversampling Democrats, I'm gonna put this, as lean D. Bear in mind there's even more reasons to that margin. Trump is heavily campaigning in New York. He's even gonna do a rally in New York City in Madison Square just a few weeks before the election. He's focusing a lot of his time, money, and resources into this state. And alongside the immigration crisis in New York City, which could lower Democrat turnout, alongside, maybe getting some GOP voters in 2024, and New York technically being Donald Trump's home state. Because of all those reasons, and alongside the polling already showing a 10% drop from 2020, I think that's why I have this in the best case scenario for Donald Trump in a red wave prediction, going barely for Democrats by 3 to 5%. So yeah, very interesting what could happen in New York. And now let's go to the Rust Belt. In Wisconsin, polling fair shows Trump winning here by 1%, but I think with the internals from Tammy Baldwin showing Trump winning by 3, it could even be more than that, but I'm gonna put this as a 2% to 4% victory for Donald Trump, and already he's past 270. And Pennsylvania, another Rust Belt state, actually shows this bare as a toss-up and as a close call. But if everything goes right for Donald Trump and the polls are wrong, the economy is #1 issue, which I've seen some sources say, this will mean a Trump victory and a Trump landslide by probably 1 to 3%. Bear in mind, Joe Biden did get some home state advantage because of how much time he spent here in his life. So you gotta also factor that in. And I think, Trump victory in Pennsylvania too. And now to the tilt states. So let me start off in New Hampshire. It's one of the few states that polling actually shows that it could actually take a swing to the left from 2020. Right, 2020, 7.4 victory for Biden, barely below 7% for Harris. In most states, especially swing states, Harris is getting half of what Biden got percentage-wise. It almost went to Trump in 2016, and I think that's what it's going to happen in 2024. I think Democrats, Trump best case scenario, they still barely hold out in New Hampshire. It could go either way, but overall, I think this is a Trump state that is just barely out of his touch and in reach. And now let's go to Minnesota and the 2nd district of Nebraska. So in Minnesota, this is the home state of Tim Walz, so that's really the only reason why I think it probably would stay with Harris and Walz in 2024 in this scenario. But even polling fair shows it being below 5%. it's very close, but I think Harris barely holds out and is saved by Tim Walz in Minnesota, of course. So yeah, the Democrats keep that streak from Jimmy Carter. Second district, it is looking quite tough for Donald Trump to win the second district when you got CNN #1 rated pollsters showing Harris winning by 9%. But if they're off as they were in 2020, it could be very close. Still, that's one of the areas that I see Trump being weak is with suburban women. But even in the best case scenario for Donald Trump, I think that you got Omaha. It's a city, so that's really hard for Trump to do well in. But yeah, still barely a Harris victory. And for the last two states, for Michigan and Virginia, I'm gonna go to Michigan actually. So poll fair shows Michigan, even with polls weighed, has Michigan only going for Harris by 1%. The polls are even more wrong than 2020, and Trump does even better than what they're saying, and the economy is actually the #1 issue. I think it's very narrow. There is some Trump insiders saying that they expect Donald Trump to win, definitely in Michigan. Bear in mind, take it with a grain of salt. Even if the Trump campaign is expecting that, it's going to be extremely narrow. It's going to be a repeat of 2016, probably the same margin. And yeah, that's it for the Rust Belt. And for Virginia, in 2020, went for Biden by 10%. 2016, it went to Hillary by only 5%. Bear in mind, her VP was from this state, though, so that's gotta think about that. Youngkin, the governor of Virginia, has done quite well with approval ratings. He's a GOP governor in a Democrat state, of course. You got these polls, even they're showing 7% victory. The GOP is spending quite a lot of money in Virginia, and alongside all that, poll fair 4%, like I said. It's very close, but from what I see, the momentum, the GOP donors spending so much money in Virginia, and in Trump's best case scenario, I do see Virginia barely going to win by the skin of his teeth, and Virginia goes for the GOP for the last time. And as you can see, in the 2024 Red Wave prediction, in the best case scenario for Donald Trump, Trump wins with 325 electoral votes, while Harris only gets 213 electoral votes. Let me know what your map looks like. Feel free to leave a like, join the channel membership, and the Discord. Have a good one.